Right, good evening, everybody, and welcome to our latest session of QABC. We've got an amazing session this evening, which I really am looking forward to. But as per normal, we'll go through the code of conduct. QABC is always a safe place to be. It will always be a free event. Everyone is always welcome. We do ask that you do be respectful to others. This is an online session. If you do have any questions or wish to ask anything or say anything, if you just please remain on mute. Please feel free to have your cameras on, that's absolutely fine, but we do ask while the speaker is speaking, you remain on mute. Please feel free to add any comments or questions into the chat during so. Then at the end of the talk or the opportunity, we will go through the questions or your comments and reply to those for you. If you do find anything has been disrespectful or something's not been right or something's been said or you feel uncomfortable with something, please bring this attention to Ashley, Ken, or myself. Then we'll investigate and look into it. And if any of the rules do keep being broken, unfortunately, we'll have to ban people from future events. Thankfully, technically, this has not happened yet, and we intend on keeping it that way. Okay, so without further ado, I am going to hand over our guest speaker for today, and that is Veena. And over to you.
Okay, thanks, Chris. So let me share my screen. And I'll be starting my presentation. Hey, good evening, everyone. Thanks for being with me for this wonderful evening. And my special thanks to the QA Beginners Club for giving me this opportunity to interact with you guys. So today, let me talk about myself. And I, as a woman, I took a lot of breaks, come back with a different set of learning curves, and now started my journey as a like a project engineer, and now I am working as a software test architect. So let's talk about how I reached this place, and then our main focus is to talk about mobile automation using Appium. So now in this era, everything is mobile, and I hope most of you guys joined through mobile Zoom app. So we can't live without mobiles, mobile apps. So everybody needs a quality. So we'll talk about how we are going to maintain the quality of mobile application using an Appium automation tool. There are a lot of tools available in the market. So here today we'll talk about one of the most renowned tool called Appium. Especially when it comes to Appium, people used to say that it have a tedious configuration rather than like focusing on the coding, syntax, all those things. So we'll see how easily we can solve by doing a step-by-step configuration. And we'll execute our automation scripts in real devices as well as the emulator. And also we'll see how we can scale our test execution using one of the device provider in the market. And feel free to ask your questions after my presentation. I'm happy to answer those. Let's get into. Yes. So this is briefly about me currently working as test architect. I was worked as a solution engineer for SmartBeer tools like Test Complete, Ready API, cross-browser testing, Bitbar. And I also very enthusiastic developer evangelist. So I love to interact with people, even for both mutual learning and as well as the teaching part. So I worked as a trainer consultant for test automation tools, especially on Selenium and Appium. And I'm also a mentor at Mentor Club. It is one of the largest place where people can find their mentor in a different areas of interest. And personally, I'm a mom of 2 little princes. I love to cycle, coffee lover. I can spend hours and hours with coffee and books. That's about me. So here is my career journey. I am a fresher, passed out in 2003. I started as a project engineer. It's kind of a manual test engineer in one of the renowned MNC called Wipro. Then till 2008, I shifted between like testing, development. It was the era of Java 1.7, 1.4, I think. And it was like JSP, front end is with JSP, HTML, all those things. Then I took a career break for my first maternity. It's almost 2.5 3 years maternity leave. But the main thing which I missed is I was really ideal in terms of technology. I didn't spend my time on upgrading myself. I didn't learn anything on that break. It's like completely ideal in terms of technology. So when I wants to come back, all I know is like a older version of Java. I started attending interview like almost near 20 to 25 interviews, and I couldn't put myself saying that okay, this is what I was and this is what I'm in learning curve. That is the main pitch I missed in my first break. Then again, I had a chance with my Java, like a Java basic background. I started again as a test automation engineer, as I have a Java background as well as the manual testing background. So I got opportunities to start with test automation lead with the experience of 6 years almost. So that was my breakthrough. That is the first day I heard about the selenium, right? Until then, it is 11th standard. I heard about the selenium component, but that is the era. Around 2012, I heard the term selenium on one Friday, and the expectation, the requirement of our application is a huge, university web application portal, which we have almost thousands of manual test cases, and we are trying to pitch in terms of automation. So that was the Friday around 3 o'clock. My manager came to me and talked to the team saying that we have to start a test automation of our web application using a Selenium tool, because they don't ready to pay for any major tools which were available in that time of market. So I used that weekend. I never Googled in my last 7 years of my career. I Googled a lot about the Selenium. I tried to work out, find a lot of GitHub projects in that era. So slowly I start building confidence. In that for 2 days, I spent almost 18, 19 hours to learn about the Selenium tool. And with that confidence, I went back on Monday saying that, okay, let's start our own framework rather than copying or taking something from the website. So we developed our own hybrid framework with using the test data management as an Excel sheet or Java libraries. It was like a Java 2, right? We don't have that much of IDE works, and it's only available in Firefox. We started with slowly record and playback and convert. There won't be any much converter also available. It's like a very tedious one. So we slowly started building, and at one point of time, we reached a saturated framework. And it scaled on from 10 test case to be almost automated 800 test case around the span of 7 months, like with a maximum of 2-3 test engineers. So we have a clear set of rules saying that if you want to add the new test case, follow these 12 steps kind of. So if anybody can automate a scenario if they use the test step. So that is how we defined our framework. That gave me lots of confidence about my self-learning. So I said I used like hardly 15 to 20 days to master myself in the Selenium automation tool. And with that, the moment my framework reached that scalability of 800, 900 test cases, and again, I took a career break of another 2.5 years, 2 years, something. But this time, I used my career break for the networking. So I was completely into LinkedIn. I reached people, not for getting the job again, but to learn from them, to understand what is the technology trend on that gap. So that is how I utilized my 2 years to 1.5 years break. 2015, I again restarted my career as a trainer and consultant. Rather than like a full-time employee, I started myself as a trainer. I trained almost 200 plus freshers. And as I mentioned, we have like the confidence I got over my framework. I implemented that frameworks almost 7 plus huge companies for their test automation project. And as I mentioned, I trained almost 200 plus manual test engineers, and I helped them to start their automation journey in terms of Selenium tool. So still, I can say that most of them are using my skeleton, the framework which I developed in 2012 with a trendy modification, that versions as well as the ad hoc libraries like a WebDriver manager. People are still implementing and utilizing the framework which we created in 2012. And by the time of 2015, I came out of like a the programming baggage. I am a Java developer. No, now I can say that at any languages, I can put myself to reach the test automation goal, depends on the project need. So now in 2022, I hope, yes. So now I'm here as a test architect. As I mentioned, I don't have any language barrier, whether it is a JavaScript, Java, Python, PHP, anything with the basics, like on all programming languages, I understand this basic syntax. Logically, I can think, provide the solution for any test automation requirement. And there is no tool barrier also. So I can work in any tools available in the market. Right. So I hope this is much enough about me. And as I mentioned, in those 2 career breaks, in the second break, I realized like what needs to be done when we want to come back. And I understand the importance of work-life balance when I have 2 kids at home. So I manage my timing as a consultant. So hardly I can spend a few hours for work, as well as I can balance my kids at home also. So every woman consider about like how we are going to manage a work-life balance after marriage and kids. So I can say myself as an example, from last 10 years, I'm just running behind with both paths, right? So come back to the mobile test automation. So why now we are focusing in mobile applications? So as the graph says that in 2020, in the world, we have almost 6.95 billion mobile app users, but the expectation in 2025, it is like 7.49 billion. And the research says that the average smartphone owners uses 10 apps per day and 30 apps per each month. And in any industry, any functional industry, you can see that we have lots of competitors for each mobile app. Like if you say chat messengers, we have a WhatsApp, Twitter, what do you say, Telegram, right? So every app have their own competitors. So stand out of those competitors is mandatory for every individual mobile app developers. So when it comes to types of mobile apps, we have 3 major types of mobile apps. One is a web app. We know that anything we can open in a mobile browser, we call it as a web apps. And the second one is hybrid, and the third one is native apps. So both are actually mobile friendly applications rather than where you can open in browser, rather than you need some installations. And few apps like comes along with your mobile, what do you say, manufacturers, and free you can download from either a Play Store or an App Store for iOS. So what is the major difference between a hybrid and native apps? Is the technology behind which we use to develop those applications. And in terms of hybrid, we use the Object-C, Swift, HTML5, Xamarin, Flutter. And one of the topmost hybrid app is Twitter, right? Native apps, they are developed via Java, Kotlin, Python, Swift. So the major difference between the hybrid app and the native app, hybrid apps, it is like a one code base, right? If you develop the code, you can utilize that for both iOS and Android with the different containers. But when it comes to native apps, it is like every individual whether it is Android or iOS, it needs 2 different code base. So obviously the maintenance cost, development has, everything goes high when it comes to native apps. And as I mentioned, the development web apps are less expensive to develop and it can be only accessed via web browsers. And hybrid apps, as we discussed earlier, fast development process and can be designed for both web and specific platform. And the same web application, for example, if you say Twitter, you can open the Twitter in the web application and you don't see much difference on even the UI, which if you open in a browser, you will have all the browser components like URL or all bookmarks, all those things. When you open the same in Play Store or via mobile app, the UI is mostly same with the top of mobile UI container. So that's why I mentioned it is a single code base with the top of multiple containers. And the third one, like the development process of native apps is high performing apps native to very particular devices. So when I say very native, it is whether it is a Android, it is only developed for Android. You can identify few applications which is there in App Store, but not in a Play Store, right? So those kind of applications, mostly the development technology background may be the native apps and more for a single OS. Performance, in terms of performance, we know that internet web-based application is purely depends on your internet connectivity and the type of browsers you use for your viewing that application. And for hybrid applications, downgraded performance compared to native apps. So you can see the difference between, there won't be major gimmicks in your performance, but still there may be slight performance difference in your hybrid apps and the native apps. So as the apps only act as a medium to download data from the server. So it will be like the endpoint, the core technology background is same, but only the container differs. So there will be different. Definitely, there will be some performance lags when the server talks to your different client. Native apps, faster performance and response rate as the apps have instant access to the device functionalities and the elements. So again, the technology behind to develop that individual native apps matters here. And app usage. Google, good for apps that do not require high performance, push notifications or access to device, hardware and functionality. So sometimes we prefer to use WhatsApp and some in as an application. Sometimes we ready to open that app in your browser also, M-web. So it depends on what kind of usage for that app. You can decide whether you want to develop a web application or hybrid or native application. So when it comes to hybrid apps, mostly that needs device access that do not require high performance. Like a normal chat windows, like a chat applications, your e-commerce application, it doesn't need to interact much of your mobile, like a device hardware. In those scenarios, preferably you can choose a hybrid mode of application rather than native app. And native apps especially good for games because of their performance and graphical based and consumer focused apps. Code maintenance. As I discussed in the first technology usage itself, web application need very low maintenance and same code can be used across all browsers. But when it comes to hybrid apps, it is slightly different. Code is easily portable to all platforms. Still, it may have low maintenance because a single code base with a multiple containers. But when it comes to native apps, every OS needs different development, like a code base, and the maintenance and the cost of the code base also goes high. So what challenges we face when we do the mobile app testing? Like whether it can be your manual testing or it can be you choose the tool to automate your test cases. So the first thing is wide range of mobile devices, right? We have with the same manufacturer, we have a different mobile size, different screen size, hardware, like keyboard differences, like a touchpad, all those things. And even though it's the same hardware, we have n number of mobile manufacturers. If something works in Samsung and if it is not worked in Nokia, then obviously your impact of customer retention, all those things goes low. Sorry. And different operating systems and the different versions. So even though if you say you're testing Android applications, you have to consider the mobiles having the older version of APIs, Android development APIs, SDKs, or the newer version. In both versions, your app should work. So you have to consider those things in your mind when you start testing your mobile application. And obviously, there is a frequent updates on the software also, which should not impact your existing installed application. So different network speed. If your application works only on Wi-Fi, then what about the people using 2G and 3G? So you have to think about the performance of your application, usability of your application in different network speeds also. And device memory. If the application works only on 250 GB SD card phones, it's not going to be the case in a real time, right? So with considering all these criteria in a mind, what type of test case or what type of testing you should perform to consider or to release a quality mobile app in your to the market. So the first thing is manual testing. We test everything manually, whether it is a usability, your hardware, software, your performance, everything will test manually. We don't consider any tools or any libraries to achieve that. And the automation testing, we choose the test cases which can be automated, the tools available in the market with some extent, right? You cannot automate everything in terms of mobile application. Usability testing, it actually ensures that the mobile apps are easy to manage, user-friendly to enable business to improve customer satisfaction. So whatever the functionality you're having in your mobile app, if it is not user-friendly, then obviously people are not going to use that application and use that functionality. So you have to consider the UX and US testing in terms of mobile application. Performance testing, it actually needs to understand application behavior and performance across various scenarios, whatever we discussed in the previous slides. Like if it is a different set of network, different set of device capabilities, hardware, software, everything you're in at any scenarios, your mobile application should reach the quality. Security testing, obviously anybody can hack your mobile and your application should not vulnerable for that. So it analyzes potential threats, vulnerabilities, and helps validate standards such as authorization, authentication, and session management, right? So if you log into the WhatsApp, it should be there for until you sign out manually, or if you uninstall that manually. If not, if every time you open, it asks for the OTP or if it asks for the password, obviously it is a usability issue. So we should think about that way to consider your mobile application testing. Interrupt testing. So this is one of the major scenarios we have to consider in terms of mobile application testing. So which means that what is that interrupt testing? Which means a critical scenarios today's day-to-day age around how the app performs when interrupted by incoming calls, text messages, push notifications, alarms. There will be a lot of applications, a lot of mobile device notifications comes when you use WhatsApp. So for every notification, if your app crashes or goes to the background, it's not going to be people don't like that app, right? Even though the performance is good. So those kind of interrupt testing also should be considered when you do the either a manual as well as the automation testing. So what happens if you're not focused on your mobile application testing? Either it can be automation or it can be your manual testing. But finally, if you're not going to consider the quality of your app, the first thing people say is that moreover, approximately 70% of users abandon their app as it takes much time to load, right? The moment you install the app, if you're not seeing that apps comes pop up to your view, the next hardly in 5 to 6 seconds, people tend to uninstall that. Smooth user experience. So if your app crashes very frequently, either we uninstall that app or obviously we go to the competitor for that apps, right? And these two will impact your customer retention and loyalty. And the promises higher revenue. If your customer retention is good, obviously you will get higher revenue and faster app development. If you see that your automation test helps to identify bugs in the earlier stages, obviously it will help the developers to fix the bug before the release rather than keep on releasing the new patches. People used to say that in terms of mobile application, especially, sometimes the testing cost goes beyond your development cost. So the reason behind that is to when you develop, you don't focus or you don't think about like all the device, whatever the criteria we talk about, right? So when you come to that, when you come to testing that app, you have to consider all those things: device modules, OS, platforms, combination. So to achieve this, to identify the performance of your application in all those things, obviously there is a cost and time involved, right? So to do such testing more often, because even though we are focusing on modules, OS, all those things, it is not like a one time, right? Whenever you release the new patches, new functionalities, adding a new feature in your test application, you have to redo all the testings. So obviously, it will help, it will increase the time as well as your cost involved for the testing. So to solve such a critical situation, the best situation is to automate testing as much as possible. So doing all these manually will going to eat a lot of your time. So obviously the time to market for your mobile application, especially the quality application, is going not to happen if unless otherwise you automate the test cases as much as possible. So the moment you decided to start, okay, let me start automation for my mobile application, what are the process or how you have to proceed next? So the first one is you have to identify or you have to define your test strategy. So nothing but the tools you're going to use, the functionality you're going to focus, all those things. So the second one is you have to choose the right tool. There are n number of tools available in the market, like extensively code based. If your team is really good in scripting, you can go for the code based tools. If not, if you have a shortage of technical uh, strength on your team, so you can definitely choose the low code tools like a Catalan Studio, or there are a lot of record and playbacks tools available in the market. So you can preferably choose that. Either you have to compromise on the technology, like technology strength or the cost of your testing. So next, whether it is a script based or the record and playback or a low code tool, definitely it's going to time to develop the test scripts based on your functionality complexity. And finally, how effectively you are going to execute to achieve all the components we have seen in the previous slides, like a different OS, different device manufacturers, under different hardware and software criteria, and how effectively you're going to utilize the reports. So without analyzing the reports, just execution or developing the scripts is not matter, right? Not going to help. So the amount you're spending your script development, you have to spend that scripts into setting a right test execution environment as well as the proper reporting structure. Now, as I mentioned, here is the list of mobile test automation tools available in the market. If you take any script-based framework, so Appium, Robotium, and Expresso, these are like mostly a script-based. You need a proper programming language. The person should know a high, what is it? It is not like a beginner's level. You need to understand much in depth of the programming language to start with those kind of tools. And there are a lot of low code tools available in market, which anyway cost involved here. Test Complete, Catalan Studio, Eggplant, Cobitium, Renores Studio. These are especially focused more on mobile application testing, as same as like a web application testing. And when we talk about scaling your test execution, so when you use this Appium in your local, you can execute maximum of to the max 5 to 6 devices, like a different devices, right? But it's not going to help you to achieve the goal, what we are talking about, like different OS, different scenarios of your mobiles. So definitely you have to utilize the device forms available in the market. I'm just named 4, but there are a lot more device forms available. So what I mentioned as a device form, these are the cloud-based provider, which provides either a real devices or the emulators based on your condition, and obviously cost involved. So for next a few minutes or a couple of minutes, we are going to spend extensively on the tool called Appium. The reason why we choose Appium as our mobile test automation solution is the first thing, it is an open source. There is no cost involved to use the tool, right? And it will help you to automate both native, hybrid, as well as your web applications, web apps. So Nate, just a recap of what is native applications. Those are written using iOS, Android, and Windows SDKs. Mobile web apps are web applications that can be accessed using mobile browsers. And APM supports Safari on iOS devices and Chrome are the built-in browsers. So let whatever the default browsers for that manufacturer, it will APM will help you to automate or open the browser or use that particular browser. As I mentioned, APM is a cross-platform which allows you to write test case against multiple platforms such as iOS, Android, and Windows. Use the same API, same class, and the same structure, right? Slightly, if it is a hybrid app, mostly you don't need any changes for in terms of Android and iOS. But if it is a native app, obviously there will be a UI changes, design changes, or the element identifier changes. So obviously you have to rework some in some extent to utilize the same test scripts for both iOS and the Android. And you can write your APM test with a different programming language. So as I mentioned, it is an open source as Selenium. If you guys are familiar with Selenium, Selenium supports almost all the programming languages. Same like APM have the APIs in a different programming language, which includes all major like Java, C Sharp, JavaScript, everything. Whatever the script you are familiar, you can start your automation with that programming language. So there is no need to learn a specific programming language, especially to the part of APM scripts. As I mentioned, if you know any other programming language, you can start with that. And this is the basic APM architecture. The moment you write the test scripts in your preferable programming language, it's going to convert a mobile JSON via protocol and it sends to APM server. APM server converts that request into a UI automator framework, and in turn, it will use this bootstrapped jar. And again, from the API, from the mobile device, you will get the response, and that again it converts to in your readable format, and it will come back to your client library, whatever the client library used in a different programming language. So here our focus is the mobile JSON wireless wire protocol and the bootstrap jar. So by using these two, mobile APM server is interact between your client library and the end application. So this is how the workflow, as I mentioned, client libraries convert the user written comments to the REST API request. These requests are sent to the APM server using a mobile JSON wire protocol. APM server forwards these requests to target our Android device and the emulator. So APM is actually a concept of client server library. So client, you may interact, you can write your client libraries, client code, whatever the test automation script we are using, that we call it as a client. It can be in a different languages, but internally, all this client library code reaches the APM server in terms of mobile JSON wire protocol, right? So these commands, the moment APM server forward that into an Android device, those commands are interrupted by bootstrap.jar, which converts them into a mobile understandable UI automator format, right? So here there are two parts. From client library, it sends to APM server, and from APM server, it goes to whatever the device we are going to talk about. So the UI automated commands are now performed on the device or emulator. It can be your real device or it can be your emulator. Device and emulator then reverts the outcome of the performed command to the APM server, again via the bootstrap. APM server towards this response to the client. So there are three parts now. One is your client libraries. The second one is your middle layer is your APM server. The endpoint is your device. So the first thing, the moment I say device, we'll try to utilize the real devices, right? So the first requirement is your mobile device should be in a mode of developer. Like there is something called developer mode. And before I get into this, I want to introduce a tool called Visor. Okay. So this is the tool What is the purpose of this tool? You can install this tool. It is a simple exe file. The moment you install this tool, after that, if you connect your real devices with the system using this your USB port, you can view your mobile device like this. So here I have connected my mobile Samsung in my system using the USB port. Your visor tool help you to view your mobile device in your desktop, right? There are a lot of tools available in market. I am preferably using visor. So as I mentioned, if you want to execute your Appium test cases, the scripts into your real devices for any web, like any, whether it can be your browser or it can be your native or hybrid application, the first thing is you have to enable your developer mode of your mobile device. So how to do that? Go to your settings, and it can be slightly vary for every like a different mobile manufacturers, but in turn the concept is same, right? The moment you open, you can see I'm just interacting with my mobile, and you are able to see that in the screen, right? So I'm just having back. The moment you open your settings, go for the what do you say? There is something called about your phone, right? In that, look for your build number. You can see it here, right? If your mobile is not enabled for development mode, then you have to tap this build number 7 times, right? I'm trying to start tapping. I'm getting a message saying that no need, developer mode is already enabled for my system, for my mobile device. So when you start freshly, if your mobile is not available, not open for developer mode, then you have to press this build number 7 times. Then obviously it will get enabled. And after that, you have to look for your USB, right? So when I search USB, you can see USB debugging, right? You have to enable this USB debugging also to effectively interact your Appium test cases in your real devices, right? With that, this pre-configuration, your mobile device, your real device is ready to execute any Appium test cases, right? This is the first configuration setup, precondition you have to perform when you want to execute your mobile Appium test case into your real device. The second thing, back to my, yes, right? To start writing the actual script, we have to set up, or we need these set of tools. Here, I'm going to use IDE, Integrated Development Environment, to write my test script as an IntelliJ. You can use Eclipse also if you're preferable, or you can use any Java based. As I'm going to start, I'm going to use Java as my programming language, Java as my client library to write my Appium test cases. And the automation tool is nothing but Appium. For my Java project, I'm going to use Maven as my build tool, and you can go for the Gradle also if you're familiar with. And the testing framework, preferably I choose TestNG. You can choose JUnit also. The platform I'm going to test, as this is my Windows machine, I choose Android as my test platform today. And emulators. So when I say emulators, it is nothing but you're going to create a virtual device with respect to your device configuration. You can choose your device size, the API version of your emulator, a skin of your emulator. Like if you want to stimulate, or if you want to see a virtual device like a Samsung, you can create with that skin, right? So I'm going to use Android Studio as my emulator. Device form, I thought to use Lambda test, but unfortunately, my Lambda test account got expired. So I'm going to use browser stack. As I mentioned in previous slides, there are a lot of competitors available. Browser stack, Sauce Labs, cross-browser testing from, Bitbar and cross-browser testing from SmartBios. All are popular or available device forms in the market. So to start with your Appium environment, like Appium development environment, the first thing is you have to install your Java. If your system doesn't have Java, please download download Java latest version. And after your exe execution, you have to set up your Java home, right? And I'm continuing this session expecting that you have a familiarity about basic Java concepts, the project setup using any IDE. So I'm not focusing on that areas rather than focusing on conditions like a pre-configuration of Appium and the scripting of Appium test cases. And after your installation, as I'm going to use Maven as my build tool, you have to install Maven. Maven is not actually the installable. It is a zip folder. You can unzip and you have to set up m2_home on your environmental variable. And the third part, as I mentioned, I'm going to use IntelliJ as my IDE. You can just download and install IntelliJ. What do you say? There is a free community edition, is a free version. I'm using that only. And the next one is, as we keep on talking about Selenium architecture, the middle layer is nothing but Appium server. So you can download a Appium server from the provided link. And the moment you open that, after installation, if you open that, you can see the screen like this, right? You have to start the server. Either you can start manually using this UI, or you can write a script to start the Appium server in your script itself, right? If you want to integrate that with any of your CI/CD tool, rather than doing a manual start, it is always suggested to write the code-based server startup, right? So here, the moment you see that, open your command prompt. If your local host, if your IP address is not set as a local host, I prefer to use your IP. So just open the command prompt and type for IP config. You can identify your IP address and you can mention that, right? And you have to edit the configuration. There are two configurations we need to set up. The one is your Java home. The second one is your Android home. So to let's see, or rather than I can show. So here is the screenshot about the Appium tools, right? Okay. So you need to start your edit configuration and it asks for the, I think there's a slide changes. Yes. Let me open again. So Java we already installed, but to get the Android home, Android SDK, as I mentioned, I'm going to use my platform as the Android. So you have to set up this Android home. From where it is coming, initially like a couple of years before, you can install the Android SDK without Android Studio. But now it is comes with the package of Android Studio. So it is necessary to install the Android Studio. So go to the respective URL. You can download the Android Studio based on your OS. It can be your Windows or it can be your Mac. You can download that. The download shows these many screens. It's like kind of a little tedious process. You have to make sure that you are doing that in the right way. So here is the screenshot. As my machine have already installed, I'm just showing that in terms of screenshot, right? After you complete this, setting this Android virtual, you need this Android virtual device also to be selected when you install this Android Studio, right? After you complete all these setup, now time to open your Android Studio. And Android Studio is specifically IDE for Android development. But we are not going to use Android Studio as a development environment, but we need that to create our virtual devices, as well as we need that SDK available inside my Android Studio. So here is my Android. Let me open that. Okay. So the moment you open this first time, go to the more action, manage your SDK, and you have to make sure that we have installed a couple of tools selected here: Android built-in tools, platform tools, and one set of emulator. right? So especially you have to make sure that the platform tools and the emulator and the SDK build tool is installed, right? First time it won't be installed. After your the base ID installation completes, you have to navigate to this place to complete this installation, right? Once it is done, if you navigate to your, so I'm talking in terms of Windows, you can replicate that, replicate the same if you are a Mac user, right? Under your user, navigate to your app data, under local Android SDK. So this is going to be your path for Android Home, right? Not only here, it is necessary to set up your environmental variable also, right? Later, if you want to use any of your locator identifier tool, we are going to use another tool for the identifying the locators or elements in your mobile application. So to handle that, you need this, it is mandatory to set up your Android home and Java home in your environment variable path. So after doing these two, you can start your Appium server, right? So after you start the server, you can see this, there is something called, as mine is something running behind, you're seeing a lot of data, but you have to focus that you're getting the statement in your Android, like Appium server. So which means that your server is ready to handle the client libraries, which comes from different programming languages, right? I hope it is running fine. Okay. Now, the next step, back to my screen, Appium Inspector. So what is this Appium Inspector? If you are familiar with Selenium, how the Selenium interact with web application through a web element, right? You have to identify each and every element of your web application in terms of whether it can be your class path, it can be your ID. So you have to choose what kind of element identifier you are using. Based on that element identifier only, Selenium can interact with your web application. Same like how device or how Appium server will interact with your mobile device. You need the element identifier, right? So Appium Inspector is the tool which will help you to identify the elements in your web application. So let's see how to install and use that. You can just simply search. It is not an install, like it is not available. It is an open source. It's available through a GitHub project, right? So even the Selenium, your Appium server, you can find only on the GitHub, right? All the links are already added in the presentation. After that, you can check that. Now, Appium Inspector, right? So you have to navigate to the release page to download this. Okay. So based on your OS, you can download and you can install them. The moment you install, you can see the screen like this. Okay, so let me close this view. Okay, so this is the screen which you can see the moment you open your Appium Inspector. Now, what are the things you have to fill here to reach or to identify, to interact with your mobile devices? The first one is your Appium server host. So this you can identify from this place. Like if the moment a server, you're seeing the server running, where you can see which host, you can take that. And this is your remote path. You have to know that what needs to be added, right? This is nothing but WebDriver hub. And the most important point is what kind of platform and what kind of device you are going to use, right? As I mentioned, it is necessary to set up your Android home in your environment variable. After setting your environment variable of Appium, like Android Studio, come back to your command prompt. You can see if you type ADB, you should see all these options, right? And why I'm going to use this to identify what kind of device connected to my system. Either it can be your real devices or it can be your emulator. So consider first, let's start with the real devices. As I mentioned, as you see through visor, my real device is connected with the system. So my Android should identify the device through the ADB. So how to identify that whether my Android server knows this my device or not? Use devices. So you should see a connected devices in this list. So I need this device name to set up in my Appium inspector. So the first, there are few desired capabilities. So now what is the desired capability? You're going to tell both your Appium server as well as your Appium inspector saying that this is the platform I'm going to use. This is the device I connected. This is the app I'm going to install, like I'm going to interact. So to define these set of rules or these set of information to the Appium server or your ADB, like Android scripts, you need to identify, you need to understand these keywords. These are comes from desired capabilities. The list of desired capabilities, we need to use everything available in the Appium site itself, right? The list of desired capabilities, everything available in your Appium documentation. So you can choose your preferred languages and you can go for this. So these are the available options. This documentation completely talks about the Appium APIs. So Appium, basically the core part of Appium is developed using a Node.js. All these internally mostly comes in your key value pairs. It is necessary that you must understand what are the key value pair you should use to interact with your mobile devices using your Appium scripts or Appium server. As I mentioned here, platform name, device name, and your app. These are three mandatory fields. I'm going to provide these three values here. The first one is platform name is, as I know, I'm going to interact with my Android server. The device name is nothing but whatever you have identified through the ADB device. And the third one is your app, right? So how you will interact with your app in two different ways. One is if you know the APK, if you have the APK is nothing but your Android device, like Android application, right? And if you're going to use iOS, it is IPA. The file with the extension of IPA, it is your iOS app. The file with the extension of APK, it is your Android application. If you know the application, if you have the APK, directly you can add it here. Now, as I mentioned, you must know the keyword, and this is going to be your file path, right? You can give the file path. You can identify where you kept your APK file. So here I have my APK file ready to test, install and test. So this is the APK file I'm going to use, right? So you're going to copy and you can paste it here. Oh, sorry. So it should be the entire file path. Right? So after keeping this everything, you are happy to save this in a kind of template, right? Let's see how we are going to save this. Right? Let me open my saved one. And you can see. Sorry. I'm just editing the full path here by providing the end of my app also. So this is going to be your app. Now, if you want to save this configuration for future sessions, you can happily save this, right? This provided information. So if you see here, we selected what is our remote host, nothing but where your Appium server is running. and we selected this remote path, that is nothing but extension of your WebDriver/hub. It is nothing but we are considering the local Appium server as my hub. And after that, you have to provide your desired capabilities. As I mentioned, the moment you save, excuse me, the moment you save, you can see this saved capability set, right? These are my predefined things. So if I want to open this, I can reopen and I can see whatever I have given here, right? I can start the session. The moment I start the session, so one main thing is, especially when you use the real device comparatively your emulator or simulator, the execution will be little fast. But in general, you cannot expect the speed of your mobile automation as same as your web application automation. Later, the execution you can speed up, but not the actual development of script. It's the way you interact with your web element, to the way you identify the web elements. It will be like a slow process comparatively with your Selenium test cases, right? So here, let me unlock. So this is how you're going to interact with your mobile devices. Whatever you're seeing is nothing but the mobile device we mentioned in our capability. So I'm going to open the app I have given. Okay. Once the app is open, every time you have to refresh the screen to see the latest screen viewer. Now, the moment you highlight your element, right, your Appium inspector will show you the respective element identifier, right? Anything, whatever you are showing, whatever you're highlighting, you can get the element identifier here, and you're going to use this in your actual scripting. So for each interactions, it is necessary to identify the element identifier using this Appium inspector. Then only you can write the script to interact with your mobile devices. And here I'm going to use this login button, and I have already copied, like I know what are the element identifier for this username, password, and the login button. Now, how I'm going to use that. So what is the next step on your mobile automation? As I mentioned, you have to create your Maven project. I'm going to use Maven as my build tool. So I'm going to create a Maven project in the IntelliJ, right? So here is my Maven project. Okay. So the moment you say Maven project, you can see this POM file with empty. The moment you create, how we are going to create this using this project, and you can choose Maven as your build tool, and what is your programming language you can preferably choose. Give the project name, and your project is ready. What are the dependencies we have to add to start with your Appium test cases? There are majorly 3 Maven dependencies. So from where you're going to identify the Maven dependency, there is a Maven repo available. So all you have to know is what are the dependency you should add for what purpose. So the first thing, I need my Appium dependency. As I know, I'm going to use my Java library, Java as my library. So you are going to use this dependency, io.appium in terms of Java client, right? So just search this in your Maven repo. You will get the latest version, whatever the latest version available. Here I'm going to use 8.2. Just click this and add it in your dependency of your form file. Same like Selenium Java, because I'm going to use the driver object from the Selenium only. Appium is Appium in terms you internally using Selenium drivers to interact with your mobile application as well as the web application, mobile webs. And as I mentioned, I'm going to use TestNG as my test framework. So these are the minimum dependency you need to start with your execution. Later, if you want to use the data-driven test cases, if you want to read your Excel sheet, then you have to identify and respective like Apache PY or a JXL kind of libraries. Then you have to include that in your form file. And as of now, we are going to execute only the standalone Java test engine test cases. If you want to execute that as a test suite, and if you want to integrate with that, integrate those test suite in your CI/CD pipeline, then you have to include Surefire plugin in your Maven file. So I'm not going to focus all those things. I'm just going to start the project with the minimal requirement to write the Appium script. And with that, these three, I'm ready to start my first Appium test case. Now, when you do manually, you start with your real devices. Sometimes testing in your real devices may not be possible, right? So now I want to use an emulator. I want to use different, as mine is Samsung, I want to execute my test cases in a different set of devices. So how to achieve that? Now your Appium, your Android Studio comes in picture again. So Android Studio, we are using for two different purposes. One is to get your SDK manager, and the second one is to understand your ADB, the device connected or the device you want to interact along with towards your Appium. The second purpose is for the device manager, right? You're going to create an emulator using your Android server. To do that, come back to your more action, virtual device manager, right? If you're not seeing any list in this application, in this place, you can able to create a new devices, select the size of your, the size which you want to stimulate as your mobile devices, select that, navigate to the next screen, and you can choose the any available API level. So API level is nothing but the version your mobile device using. It is not necessary that you have to test only on the latest version of APIs. You can go any legacy versions of API. For some extent, it is available. If not, you have to download using your SDK manager. The next one is the moment you select anything, okay, you are about to install that, then you can go for the second screen, or you can see the latest advanced version also, right? And let me download this R version. Okay, it takes a couple of minutes to download the API version, whatever you have selected. I'm seeing few chat. Is there any questions? Meanwhile, when the download happens, I can check this. Question is, I do not know.
Yeah, if nobody else has a question, please feel free. So I kind of always struggle with, obviously in web browser, you can kind of manipulate the speed of the internet connection. But is there any way to manipulate the connection speed on an actual mobile phone device?
Yes. So when you use real devices, you can set up your own connection speed, right? You can manipulate your network speed in your real devices. But when you use this, especially the emulators, local emulators, the Android Studio emulators, it is not possible to set up the network speed whatever you want. That is the solution those are the solution provided by the device clouds like a Lambda test or like a browser stack. The moment you choose the like a real devices or emulator from the device lab, they have the setup with the different network levels, right? But if you want to test your web application in your with the different network levels, you can happily use your Chrome browser to set up the different networks level. But in terms of apps, you have to utilize either your real devices or the device cloud.
Yeah, I had a feeling you were going to say that. Yeah, I was hoping it was like, yeah, that's where I could actually kind of physically.
Yes. Wiser is the tool which you can see your mobile device in your desktop. So now the required API is finished, and I'm ready to use this API to move to the next screen. And you can give your ADK name, that AVD name. AVD is nothing but Android's virtual device. and the way you want to see your emulator, whether it can be your portrait or if you want to test your application in a landscape mode, you can choose this. And in an advanced setting, you are able to see even here. Okay, now it is available here. And but it is not that extensively, right? As I mentioned. If you want to set up your network speed for that particular emulator, you can choose here, right? Even the latency. And you can select your graphical mode and as well as the boot option. If you want to boot the quick boot, or if you want to stimulate all your device like a hardwares of your devices, then you can use this. And you can set up your RAM, heap size, all those things. If you want to use this SD card options, you can use that, right? After all this basic setup, the moment you finish, the new device, virtual device get added here. At any moment, you can start any of the devices available in your device manager. Now, rather than using your emulator like a real devices, you want to use your emulator. Again, you can use this command. Okay, if you use this devices now, ADB devices, it is understandable that there are two devices available. The two devices, ADB, your Android is, what is that? Understanding that it is get connected. So based on the device name, your execution will happen on the selected device, right? Now, if you want, you can remove your USB connection. So you can disconnect your real devices, or you can disconnect your emulator using this emulator like interactions. Okay, I can close my emulator using this, right? So now back to my scenario. So I am not going to write live code, but I can explain the code which will help you to execute your Android script or Appium script in your mobile devices. So let's talk about the desired capabilities. Again, however your Appium inspector uses, the same way your script also going to talk about the capabilities, or what do you say? The parameters you want to execute, the parameters you need to execute your script. So the first thing is device. The device is nothing but your platform, and your device name you have to choose from your ADB. It should not be like it is a, what do you say? You have to copy that, the entire thing, whatever you are seeing in terms of device, you can copy that, paste it here. And this is one of the major one. This device name and platform name is the mandatory field. And my platform is Android. The next one is your APK, right? Let's say you don't know what is the exact keyword. These are the keywords. You cannot change this. Okay. Even if you say, as you know, Selenium, like Java is a case sensitive, this will not work, right? So if you're not aware what is this exact keyword, then you can use the capability manager. Here, all these are related to mobile capabilities. So you can use this mobile capability type dot, right, device name. In turns, it is nothing but it is going to provide device name as your key, right? Same like I have tried for the app. That is nothing but what is your APK to interact, to install in your real devices or in your emulator for this test case, right? Now, the third point, the most important point is how you are interacting with your mobile devices. As you see the Appium architecture, this is your client library. Whatever you are writing script is your client library. And my endpoint is already available. My device is already connected. Either it can be your real devices or it can be your emulator. My real device is available. Where is the middleman? How I am going to talk to the middleman? This is the syntax. So you are going to instantiate the Android driver. It needs the hub. This is my hub address. This is same as whatever we have given in Appium inspector, right? If you go back to your Appium inspector, this is your host name and this is your hub, like an endpoint, right? That is the same thing we are reusing here. And along with that, I'm passing a capability to understand, interact with this, consider this as a client library. This is my middleman. and this is my endpoint. Endpoint is nothing but your real devices. What about the platform? What is the application you are going to use? What is your device you are going to talk about? All these capabilities we are passing to my middleman, right? The moment you execute this step, now there is a connection enabled between your library, client library, my Java code and my devices, right? The next one is you have to interact with your devices. So this WebDriver wait is nothing but, if you're familiar with, considering that you're already familiar with Selenium test cases or Selenium scripts, this is nothing but it will put the entire execution for some time, like it slow down the entire execution, right? Here I'm giving a space, I'm giving a 30 seconds to instantiate my mobile device, right? With the APK provided. It's nothing but the APK installation time. So what I'm going to do, first thing, as when I use my Appium server, I can see that my mobile, like username password is already provided in the OTO. So directly I'm going to click my login button. So here I'm manually doing, this is what I'm going to stimulate from the executor. So as I mentioned, I use this UI Appium inspector to identify the element which I have used here. So for the login button, this is the class name. So as same as Selenium, Appium also use different types of element identifier with respect to Appium, right? So rather than using the normal by, if you use Appium by, you can get lot of, if you use Appium by, you can use lot of other options like accessibility ID. This is one of the mobile specific element identifier, right? The view tag, view matcher. So those kind of image, if you want to identify any image, you can directly use this. So to use those kind of specialized Android based or iOS based identifier, you can use Appium by rather than normal by. So this is nothing but, on that login button, I'm just simulating a click event, right? Here, as I mentioned, my real devices, I'll open these to make sure that we are able to see the interactions. So using this @test annotation, I'm going to instantiate, I'm going to execute these scripts. So this is nothing but on my real devices, whatever the device I'm provided, I'm going to install the application, wordqa.apk, and I'm going to interact with a single element, right? So let me just comment out these unwanted codes. We'll talk about this later. So if I execute this, as I mentioned, I'm not going to use testng XML also. Directly, I'm just right clicking this execution, this code. So before that, you have to make sure that your server is running and your ADB is connected, like your device is connected with your system, to make sure that I'm just giving the ADB device. So which means that my device is connected. Now simply right click and execute this. And my vote QA, my QA like a visor is helping to see whether it is happening or not. So it's slow, it is little slow comparatively with your Selenium test case. Now you can see that it is install the application. If the application is not there, it will reinstall. If not, if there is any updates, it will reinstall. Otherwise, it will pick up the APK and it touched your login button. So interaction is same. Whatever you are performing, the click, your touch, your scroll, everything can be automated using your Appium. The key point is you should know what action you're performing, what is your element to interact with that, right? So now there is a major change between your mobile application and the web application. It is nothing but your finger interactions, right? With your mobile application, you scroll down, you swipe, you just double tap. All these interactions can be automated using your Appium. So for example, here in these two statements, I'm showcasing that how to do a scroll. So what I'm trying to do it here is with this test case. So if you see here, the moment it installed, going back to my vote key, I'm just doing a manual interaction, what you're seeing in your visor. right? After login, you can see the top is the native view and the down is a carousel view, right? I will scroll this to see the wheel picker and I will click, right? So this is what I manually did and this is what I have scripted. Like I'm trying to stimulate the same statement. See here, this is the syntax. You cannot change this. So here you're going to identify using one element identifier. So what is that element identifier? And if you click this, I am into a different screen. So it will launch the screen again. Okay, one sec. What I have connected here, this is my real device. Starting again. Okay, so if you're going to connect your real device for the first time, in your device, you can see multiple pop-ups saying that authenticates this connection, all those things. So you have to keep watching your mobile screen for the first time connection. You have to authenticate your Appium server to interact with your mobile device. Okay, so now you are seeing that. And as I mentioned, I want to focus this white picker. And here is the content description. This is nothing but the text available in that particular element. So I am using that as my element identifier. And I'm using a syntax saying that UI scrollable, nothing but I'm trying to implement the scroll event in my application. So with these two statements, now it will stimulate the scroll, right? So let me quickly re-execute this. Okay, let me open the visor so that we can see that what is happening. Okay, so after the login, it's just scrolling, clicking the wheel picker, done, right? So this is how you're going to convert your manual test cases, manual scenarios as a test script using your Appium, right? Here we connected to my mobile devices, real devices, and by changing this device name, if you open this device manager, like any of the virtual devices, identify the device name using this ADB devices. Then if you use that particular device name, rather than executing real devices, you will execute in your emulator. There is no difference other than giving the specifying the device name. There is no major difference. There is not major. There is no difference of using emulator and the your local device because your Appium server is running locally. But as I mentioned, if you want to scale up your execution, see here I'm using only maximum of 2, 3, 4, 5 devices, even if I extensively use my device manager, right? But that is not sufficient to qualify my application to release in my app store, right? There will be a various different types of manufacturers, different types of scenarios like a hardware, software changes. So it is necessary to test my application in a wide range of devices, right? To do that, I have to choose any of the providers available in the market. So every market, every device provider, cloud providers have different set of keywords or different set of capabilities to include their Android, to interact with their device cloud. So when it comes to browser stack, the moment you come to the place, you can see the screen, right? Sorry. The moment you log in, you can see the screen. So this will help you to identify what is your remote. When I say remote, till now I have executed my Android server in my local, but when you use this browser like a cloud form, it is nothing but your Android server is running remotely, right? Rather than the local Android server, you're going to use the remote server. And other capabilities are same for Appium, but with respect to device clouds, you're going to add one or more capabilities. Now, what are the things I need to understand to perform a cloud-based or a device clouds in my execution? So the first thing, the APK you are installing, the APK you want to execute, right? So at any moment in a home page, you are able to upload your APK. The moment you upload, let's say I'm deleting this and, right? So you're able to upload your local APK. Keep this APK. And the moment upload completes, okay, they will generate a key for that, right? Just hold on, it is 90%. Okay, this key is mandatory. So I'm saving this and keeping in my notepad. So we'll see where we are going to use this keyword, right? So I'm just, okay, this is there. The second step is, as I mentioned, we are using this device cloud to use a large scale of devices, right? Where you can choose your devices. Here it is. If you want to use Android, you can choose, this screen comes because I'm going to use only the Android as my platform. The second one is your devices. So I'm using a free version. So you are seeing a limited number of devices. But when we scale up using the paid versions, then you will get hundreds of devices, which includes both emulators as well as the real devices. So you can choose anything from these available devices, right? So here I'm just, for the example, I have chosen Pixel 3. Now, the moment you choose the Pixel 3, this itself giving a desired capabilities to set up this. So here they are providing in terms of JSON. I don't want to use the JSON. I know how to set up my desired capabilities in terms of Java. So I'm going to take only the keywords and the values to utilize. So every device cloud needs your login credentials, right? So the moment you log in, it will automatically generate your username and the password. It is like what do you say? Your generated key using your default username and password, which will help you not to expose your actual password into your public. The next one is, these projects and all user-friendly names, and the build name, everything is a user-friendly. And if you want to debug later using this device cloud, you can make it true. This is the most important one. This app is nothing but you have to because when you run your local Androids, like a local Appium server, it picks the APK from your local. But as I mentioned, this APK, this Appium servers are running remotely. So you can't provide directly the APK. So the workaround is, we uploaded the APK and we generated the key. Using this key is most important for your APK, like your test cases. Then this is the one, device and the OS version. All these keywords, all the values I am going to use with respect to my keyword, right? So if you see here, this is my device, and this is, I'm just giving the device name because Android Appium server needs this as a mandatory keyword, right? Then you define the OS version, platform name, the same browser stack debug is needed, and the app, it is nothing but whatever the app. This is the old one, but you can update with the generated one, right? The next one is, you're setting up your username, password, hub URL. In a previous cases, we gave that as a local host, right? If you see here, this is my hub URL, 121, this is my local host. Here, I'm changed with that, my device cloud. It can be your browser stack. Every device cloud have their own syntax for this hub URL. And I'm going to stimulate the Android, like Android driver, using my username, access key, hub URL with passing the capabilities, right? Now, you're going to instantiate your Android driver rather than local into device cloud. So if you execute this test case, okay, let me quickly stop this test case and you can execute this. Okay, you can see the execution in the cloud. So here, if I execute this, let me execute. Okay, so the moment execution starts, just refreshing, you can see the results over here. So if you see here, these are the previous runs. Oh, sorry, could not start the new. Okay, some bad things happen, but in like logically, if everything goes fine, you can see the execution here, right? With the video, every device, because you need that. If there is any failures, you need that to debug. So to that, you need to understand what's happening on your execution, right? So the test cases, whatever we executed in the last try, you can see it here. So when you run in your local, we are using some other tool like a revisor to see what is happening directly in my mobile devices. In the same, when you execute that in a device cloud, that cloud itself providing an option to see that videos after the execution completes, right? And you can see all these logs here for your debugging purpose, right? So understanding this, again, a tedious one. Every device cloud have their own features where you can see the logs, where you can take the videos, screenshot if it is failure, what kind of capabilities you can add more, right? So every device cloud have their own capability setup. Yes, I hope I have given a heads up about what are the things you need to configure, how you can approach your initial test cases, right? It is a very beginning. The moment you take your first step, it is you can improvise, you can learn more about the complicated scenarios. So all these we need is, you know, how to interact with your mobile devices, how to set up your middle layer, nothing but your Appium server, then how to identify the elements to interact with your mobile devices, right? So those are the important points to start with your test automation. So any questions? Let me check the chat box. Do you have any other questions?
Yeah, please, everybody. Oh God, sorry, after you.
Yes. So you can reach me for further queries. I'm happy to interact with you offline, online, and through our meetup page, you can interact or you can raise your questions for next couple of weeks also, right? So we have a chat box over there.
Is there anybody that would like to, yeah, please take advantage of that for any questions now, or you can come off your mic, that's absolutely fine, or add into the chat here, that's absolutely fine as well. And we'll get any questions answered for you.
So I hope I did the justification for the time you have spent with me.
Oh, definitely. That was absolutely amazing and really, really informative. Really enjoyed that.
Yes. Thank you all.
That was amazing. Thank you very much.
Keep testing, keep finding bugs. Yes. So that's all from my end.
No, that was absolutely amazing. I can't now find my slide.
Yes.
I shall share screen, he says. There we go. Always the professional. Cool. Well, again, I would like to say an absolute massive thank you to Veena attending today and going through her talk about how she got into testing and also how Appium is used. Again, I've never seen it myself in use, and that was absolutely amazing and really informative. And I might try and start working with my developers to maybe get that introduced. Because yeah, that was amazing, and it's really good mobile coverage as well. As good as manual it is, when you got to test so many different devices, yeah, automation, I've got to say, really does save the day with that one.
Yes.
Okay, if there is nothing from anybody else, again, massive thank you again, and for all those who have attended this evening, I hope you found that informative and useful. I hope it gives you a bit more confidence as well. If you are new to automation or new to testing, that makes a lot more sense, because it definitely does to me, and I think I'm a bit of an experienced person as well. Any further ado, yep, thank you very much as usual. We can be found on Twitter at QA Beginners Club. We're on Instagram as well at QABC_MCR, and also we're on Facebook. Just look for QA Beginners Club and we'll be on there. And also we have a Slack channel. We've got a workspace at qabeginnersclub.slack.com. However, if you'd like an invite, just email us at qabcmcr@gmail.com and I'll reply with an invite for you to come and join our Slack channel. So if that's it, again, massive thank you again, and I hope you enjoyed that and have a lovely evening, everybody.
Yes. Thank you all.
Thank you very much, and have a good day and have a good morning.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye bye. Yeah.
Bye.